We recently aired part 1 of our series on the worst case of animal abuse in the history of the Northeast that happened in Westport, Massachusetts this past summer. We introduced you to Detective Jeffrey Majewski, who investigated the cruelty case when it first emerged in 2010. There were hundreds of animals in deplorable conditions, some suffering and some were already dead. However, our state animal welfare officials chose to let the people that were charged with animal cruelty walk away without penalty. Majewski, who had remarked in 2010 that he was greatly affected by what he had seen, found himself standing in a dreadfully familiar place. In the midst of the July 2016 heat wave, the Westport police were once again called to 465 American Legion Highway by someone claiming that 18 of their goats had been killed. When Majewski arrived, he was confronted with the sounds of anguish and the smell of death.
Either got tangled up in something at one point that wrapped around its leg, or was tied at one point by the leg, and it turned the rest of the hoof or the rest of the foot area necrotic. Part of his leg, the leg was dead. That animal needed to be euthanized. It's worse than it was in 2010, so the town should be ashamed that this was allowed to continue. It's deplorable.
When police arrived on the scene, they discovered over 1,400 animals in varying states of distress and illness. In addition to the thousands of suffering animals who were alive, there were numerous dead animals that perished in the terrifying condition. The Animal Rescue League of Boston rushed to the aid of the animals. The league's lead veterinarian estimated that the animals had been living like this since the case in 2010 was dismissed, and said, "This is the worst I've ever seen as far as scale and conditions." Westport Police Detective Jeffrey Majewski, who worked the original 2010 case, was quick to place part of the blame on the town's Board of Health. Outraged by the fact that this abuse could have been prevented had the Board of Health continued to monitor the property after the case 6 years ago. Majewski said, "We need other town departments like the Board of Health to step in and monitor these situations before they can become huge disasters like this." Animals were gradually removed by the ASPCA and other animal rescue organizations. It was a huge ordeal for the thousands of animals to be moved to the temporary shelters that were set up and let them receive the care they needed. Finally, 3 weeks after the initial investigation, all the animals, except a few, had been transferred by the people that were there working 24/7 to aid in the rescue efforts. Unfortunately, many animals had to be euthanized because their conditions were untreatable due to the abuse they received. One goat was just recently checked out of Tufts after being in veterinary care for 6 months. Many tenants also initially refused to surrender ownership rights of their animals. So how did this happen? How does a state with such highly regarded animal welfare rights let something on this large of a scale repeat itself? Join us next week when we expose more details and possible corruption in our state's animal welfare system.